So the job interview, yay. First want to congratulate yourself that you got the interview. That means that you had a very effective and powerful resume that stood out. So the employer is definitely interested in hiring you. After completing the information that you have sent to the employer, I'm going to walk into teaching you how to actually do the interview. Um, a lot of times when you are doing interviews too, you end up either not knowing what to say, or you don't know how to dress, or you don't know what the employer is looking for. So I'm going to give you some insight on some of that today. So you're going to have a real good idea of what the employer is looking for and also how to answer some of those tough questions. There are many different types of various of interviews. You know, a lot of times we think to ourselves, well, I'm just going to end up doing an interview and it's just going to be you, the interviewer, and me, myself. When seriously, it actually does not work that way. There can be all different types of interviews, and especially in today's world, the newest interview is a virtual interview. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. When we're done, you are going to know how to handle the difficult questions. You're going to know how to apply what we call the STAR method. And that is a wonderful acronym that you're going to learn about. And you're also going to know what do you do after the interview in regards to thank you letters, follow up, when do you call? So we'll get right into that. The interview actually, what it says here on my notes, it says it starts when you leave the house, but I sincerely believe that the interview starts the night before. So what I always recommend is that you get in the car and drive by the place that you're going to be interviewing the next day. Some of the things that I found are interesting. Our office itself moved one block down, and I still to this day have clients think that I'm in the old office. So sometimes when you think, oh, I know for sure where it's at, just drive by it and make sure that you know for sure that it's still there. In addition, I also want you to be aware of whether or not you have to take an elevator. Sometimes the elevator isn't working. You have to take 13 floors up to the interview. Well, you could possibly run the risk of being late. I have never ever had anybody get back into an interview if they were late. So typically that is if you end up showing up late for an interview, you're basically saying you're not interested in the job. Okay. So in addition to that, I also want you to make sure that you've got good directions on how to get there. So that's why I recommend that you drive the night before. Take into consideration maybe the flat tire or traffic as well. Some of those things can delay you, and you don't want that happening. I also want you to be prepared before you go to that interview. So I want you to do a little bit of research. I for sure want you to go online and see if the company has a website. In addition, when you're doing some research, I want you to find out, for instance, like what their mission statement is, what does the company stand for, what do they actually do, and make sure that you know a little bit more about them than what you originally did. Don't go in there and say, what do you guys do here? I had somebody who actually said that to me when I was interviewing them one time. Another thing I want you to do is when you are looking at that website, also take a look at your job description and read that very closely. Know the skills that you need for the job, okay? Another thing I want you to do is just take a few minutes to check your attitude. You know, a lot of us have been through really tough time with this pandemic, and it is very, very hard to keep a positive attitude. It's easy to get depressed, to be fearful, to not know for sure what to do, where to go. That's why we want you to reach out to us, because we can help you with mock interviews. We can help you with some of the companies. We actually know them, and we've gone out and talked with them and advocated for you before they've even posted a job, finding out what do they want in an employee and what are they looking for when they interview, what do they want to hear. So we can give you that inside scoop as well. One of the things too is that it's important that you look good. Okay. So I always recommend that before you go into the interview, that one, you show up 15 minutes early. You don't show up a half hour early. That's creepy. Okay. Before you go, make sure that you go to the bathroom. Look at yourself in the mirror. Okay. I interviewed a gentleman one time that had something green on his tooth, and I didn't know him well enough to say, "Excuse me, sir, you have something green on your tooth." So look in the mirror and make sure everything is where it needs to be. Um, Be prepared to discuss your skills and your gaps when you're actually in the interview. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, I'll say, well, tell me what some of your skills are. A lot of people really struggle with that because we don't normally talk that way. We don't normally get into talking about, hi, by the way, my name's Gloria Mitchell, and I'm a hard worker, I'm dependable, and I show up to work on time. That's not how we introduce ourselves to people. Okay. But when you are at the interview, that is the type of skills that you need to be talking about. And you need to be able to name them. Again, I told you that just briefly that there are many different types of interviews. So there is a telephone screening. That's just that. That's where you're talking over the phone. There is an in-person screening, but what we're finding is that the in-person is becoming less and less all the time, and they're going more virtual. There's the selection screening, okay, where they're actually sitting down and talking with you and selecting different skills that you have and discovering whether or not they're going to fit into the position. A screening interview too also eliminates candidates based on criteria such as the object, your objective, education, your required skills. Oftentimes HR will actually be the one who's interviewing you. And the goal is to select the best candidate that will meet with the decision maker. So HR is actually screening you. You're not even at the interview, and you may not get the interview based on their screening that they're doing. Another type of interview is the behavioral. The behavioral is just that. What they want to do is they want to find out what's your behavior going to be like on the job. So it could be personally, it could be your character. It is actually how do you handle stress? It could be that type of interview. Another interview is the work sample, and that one, I always like to use the example about if you're a welder. So if you are doing an interview and as a welder and you want a welding position, typically what they do is they have you do a work sample. Then they take that work sample after you've welded it and they put it into x-ray to see if there's any bubbles and put some pressure on it, give it a stress test. So that would be a work sample interview. Next one also is the group or peer group interview. Now this one could be where you have a group, just that, meaning more than one. Okay, I was interviewed one time with 10 people. That was just a common interview for them. Okay, another one is the peer group, and the peer group is where, let's say that I am the boss, I'm interviewing you, but then I have two work colleagues who are going to give you a tour of the factory. Okay, so that is actually known as the peer group, the two people who are giving you the tour of the factory. Know this, that when those two are done giving you the tour and we say goodbye to you, I'm going to go to the peer group and ask them what they thought and whether or not you would fit in and be a good fit for the position. So you want to be able to communicate your best image. So get everything organized early and have copies of everything that you need in a portfolio. So the first time I heard the word portfolio, I wasn't sure what that actually was. So a portfolio is actually just a fancy word for a folder. Okay. I always recommend that when you go to the interview that you have at least 3 copies of your resume. Now, you'll get different variations of this depending on who you talk to. I have one work colleague that tells everybody to bring 10 copies of your resume. It's up to you because hopefully you'll have a little better idea of what type of interview you're actually going to be going for. But to give you a real life example, I was at an interview. I had the interviewer come out and say, Gloria, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to interview you today. Our computer system went down and I never printed off your resume. So none of us have a copy of it. Well, I piped up right away and said, well, you know what? I happen to have 5 copies of my resume in my portfolio. So they did interview me. I looked like I was very organized and I ended up getting hired. Maybe that's why I did, was just based off of that. But the key is to make sure that you are prepared. You also want to make sure that you're sending off good signals. So they say that communication is 80% of it is nonverbal. Okay, so be aware, excuse me, of your facial expressions, your body language. You know, what we always tell everybody is that if you're going to give a handshake, give a firm handshake. But now I want you to keep in mind that in today's world, handshakes aren't allowed. So, whatever situation you're in, I want you to make sure that you are using the protocol that's being called at that time. Okay, so for instance, I don't have anything on my notes right at the moment about wearing a mask to the interview, but that is part of the interview, is making sure that you have a mask. Okay, also want you to make sure that you focus on the questions and answer them very carefully. You know, a lot of times when we go to interviews, we're really nervous. It's hard for us to even remember our first name, let alone all the skills and information that they're going to be trying to draw out of you during the interview. So I want you to just to be able to give yourself permission to take your time, listen carefully, and I always say use your act, think, speak skills. Okay. Um, Wrap up by summarizing your strengths. So when you've talked about your strengths during the interview, we call doing a wrap up at the end of the interview and just talking one more time about your strengths. And that's also a great time to say some of the skills that maybe they didn't, or you forgot to mention, I guess would be a better way to put it. Then another thing that is so important is to do the follow-up. So I have a lot of people ask me, okay, so well, how many days after should I call if I've interviewed and I haven't heard anything? Typically, we say 3 to 5 days, business days, okay, are fine to call. You want to make sure at the interview that you get the contact person that would be appropriate to call. So for instance, at the end of the interview, you could say, you know, I was wondering, when are you going to make the decision on who you're going to hire? Or when are you going to make this decision on when you're going to fill the position? And then, would you have a problem if I called you in a few days just to follow up and see if you've made your decision or not? Okay, at that time, they'll say yes or no. And hopefully, they'll say yes, and you can call Sandy, and here's her phone number, for instance. Okay, it's also super, super important to send a thank you letter. Okay, now, this thank you letter or note is totally up to you on the wording and how you're going to do it. So some people will do it through the format of email. So you can email a thank you letter. Another way to do it is the way that I personally do it is I go to the dollar store and get a thank you card. I get one of the bigger cards. It says thank you on the front. And then when you open it up, it is blank. And what I do is I write thank you and the person's name. Hopefully they have given me all of their names. If they haven't given me all of their names at the interview, I want to recommend that you ask them for their business cards. Okay. Also want to let you know that if they introduce themselves to you as Mrs. Johnson, then you address them as Mrs. Johnson. If they introduce themselves to you as Glory Mitchell, then when you're sending the thank you note, you're going to send it. I mean, excuse me, if I introduce myself to you as Glory, then you can use my first name when you're sending me the thank you note. So I always put, thank you, Glory, for interviewing me. I look forward to hearing from you. And then on the left-hand side, I have my phone number and my email right there. So that I'm very easy to get a hold of. Okay. Sometimes when the employer has got done interviewing and he gets that thank you note, I have found that a lot of times it could be the decision that would push it over to want to hire you as opposed to your competitor just based off of that thank you note. I'm going to go through this slide and then Sheila, I think I'm going to check in with you and see if we've got any questions, but I first wanted to talk about the STAR acronym. Beautiful thing about this acronym is that when you are at the interview, you can think about the STAR or sandwich method, meaning that use this acronym to actually help you to remember what the employer is looking for in your answers. Excuse me. So you want to be direct and you want to give honest answers. You want to ask questions in return if you do have questions. It's really important to be prepared and anticipate the questions and practice beforehand. So before I get into going off of practicing beforehand, I want to remind you that both Sheila and I and the job counselors who are located at our career force centers throughout the state of Minnesota, we will do what's called a mock interview with you. So helpful for you. because a lot of it is just going through the interview, also reminding you of what some of the questions are. And then we're taught on directly from the employers oftentimes on what they want to hear. So we can help you with that type of information as well. Okay. So you're going to use the sandwich model, meaning that you will say a positive statement, maybe followed by a negative situation, and then ending it back with a positive statement. So, for instance, let's say that they asked you, excuse me, what is one of your weaknesses? That's a very common question at the interview, and it's very difficult to answer, okay? So first I want you, please don't say I don't have any, okay? I had a gentleman say that to me, and I did not hire him because everybody has weaknesses, okay? But so you need to have something and you need to turn it back into a positive. So let me give you an example. If they were to ask me at an interview, I said, what is one of my weaknesses? I would say, well, I like to do my job perfect, but there is no such thing as perfect. So I have learned that I do the job to the best of my ability, and that is good. And that is as close to perfect as a person is going to get. And I also have learned that I'm not scared to ask for help or a second opinion to find out if it is done correctly. Okay, so do you see how you took something and I turned it back into a positive? You do want to focus on your best skills and the skills that the employer is looking for. So again, remember, excuse me, that you are there to talk about what the employer is looking for, okay, instead of what you are looking for. But again, keep it focused on your skills. So Sheila, I'm going to go to you and check in to see if you have any questions.
Yes, we did have a few come in. One of them, someone asked what the 3 words you used were: act, think, and question mark, but another participant gave the answer. It was speak, I believe.
Yes, yep.
I was busy responding and writing, so I didn't even hear what you said.
Yeah.
And then another question we had come in, let me see. Most of my interviews are set up through contracting companies, so I'm generally not supposed to contact the employer directly. How would I send a thank you note in that situation?
Okay, what I would do in that situation, okay, so you're not actually having direct contact with the employer, is that correct, Sheila?
Right. It's like a hiring company that's doing the interviewing for them.
Oh, I see. So I still would send the thank you note back to the hiring company because chances are they will forward that on to the person that's going to make the final decision. And then also, I'm thinking that the way that you're communicating too is through email, and you can send a thank you to the email through the hiring company, and then they can forward it on. I would say that would be the best recommendation.
Okay, and then another question: do you have tips for selling yourself with? You have skills that are not necessarily experienced in the area. How do you build confidence for the employer?
Oh,
so
that's a great question.
Before, how do you sell yourself to them?
So one of the easiest ways for you is going to be to get a hold of one of us job counselors at the career force located close to you. And the reason for that is because we're going to talk to you more about transferable skills. So if there is something that you're interested in, but you don't feel that you have experience or have the skills that would apply towards that job, please have a conversation with us. I know that both Sheila and I have talked with our clients, and when we've talked to them, they're after the same and similar type of job, but they're not recognizing that they already have a lot of the skills the employer is looking for. The employer is just calling it something else. Okay, I'll give you a quick example. Let's say that you painted for years, interior painting, and you're sick of painting. You want to go into something totally different, and let's say it's furniture moving. Okay. You do realize that when you're painting, you're moving furniture too. Okay. So we would take those skills that you used while you were painting and apply them to the furniture moving position, just using whatever the terms and words that the furniture moving position is looking for. Okay.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we have right now.
Wonderful. Good. Well, we will move on. Okay, so the STAR method, I would love it if you could memorize this, because it is really going to help you in regards to um, prompting you and helping to remind you of the different answers that you are expected to give during this interview. Okay, so for instance, S stands for the situation. What I want you to do is provide an example of a situation that you were involved in that had a positive outcome on the job. Okay, so you want to sit down and just think about that for a little bit. All of us have had some different positive outcomes on the job, but we don't always think about it. But now is the time to talk about it at the interview, okay, with the new employer. So you want to describe the different tasks that were involved during that situation. You want to choose the tasks that show your skills, and hopefully they're the same skills that the employer is looking for, so you can tie that together. You want to explain the actions that you took, okay, to do the situation in regards to, let's say, so I had a person who had a problem, I had to call them back, okay, so that would be an action. And then you want to describe the positive results that came from your actions. So give an example of how the STAR method actually worked for you. But the only way you're going to be able to give this example is to, one, remember what it is, think about something that really happened on the job, and then practice talking about it, okay? These are the key interview questions, and I want to tell you and remind you again that we will be sending you the slide deck, so you're going to have these questions as well. At the very least, we always recommend that you practice just even these questions before going to the interview, because these are some of the most common questions asked at an interview, okay? The first question is typically they'll introduce themselves to you and they'll say straight up, tell me about yourself, okay? Now, here is what I find so fascinating. When I would be interviewing people and I'd say, tell me about themselves, they would tell me something like this. Well, I have been married for 42 years. I have 7 children. None of them live with me anymore. And I just am looking for a job because I need to get out of the house. And I need to make some more money. What does that have to do with the job? Okay. What the employer is actually looking for is for you to give 3 things about you, okay, in regards to your skills. So let me give you an example. Hello, Glory. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in today. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Well, first off, I want to let you know I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for interviewing me. And I'll tell you, one of the things about me is that I'm a very hard worker. Um, Another thing is that I'm a woman of my word and that I'm dependable. And I'm really happy to be here and to be able to talk about some of the skills that I believe are going to make you a lot of money. And in turn, I'll make some money too. Do you see how that's different than going in and talking about your family status? They legally can't ask you about your family status. Legally can't ask you about your age. They can't ask you about your sexual preference. They can't ask you about your demographics, where you live. There are some um, rules and regulations that they can't ask, but it's not illegal if you tell them. Okay, so that's one of the reasons that they're hoping that you go ahead and tell them everything, because then they make a better decision on who to hire. Okay, now I've had people argue with me too and raise their hand and they'll say, well, how do you know that the interviewer isn't going to be delighted that I have children? Okay, now doesn't that sound wonderful? I know to me that sounds wonderful. I think, oh, isn't that awesome? Okay, but how do you know that the employer isn't thinking, great, you have children? Now your old lady's going to be calling here every day. You're going to be not showing up for work because your daycare is not going to show up. And you're going to bring in all them diseases that children carry. Okay? You don't know. They're going to tell you. But the point is that you don't know. So keep the children and the family out of the interview. Okay? Next question is, why are you interested in working for this company? Please, this is a perfect time where you could say the mission statement. I am interested in working for this company because I believe you guys create such a wonderful product and I want to be a part of that. Okay. Or you could say, I believe in your mission statement, where it says you help people to help themselves. One time I had quoted the mission statement in an interview and the interviewer said, wow, I didn't even know that was our mission statement. Okay. So It's a great place to put that in for the answer for why you're interested in working for the company. What is your major weakness? I believe that we covered that. Please have one. What are one of your strengths? Okay, I want you to talk about having some strengths as well. That is getting back into your skills. Give an example of how you solved a problem. Uh, we broke that down with the star situation, so that's where you would apply that. And then the last question is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? So now when I was interviewing a gal one time, I asked her, they'll say, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? Or, they kind of can word this a little bit different, but the gist of it is, let's go with where do you see yourself in 3 years? What the company wants to hear is that you're going to be with the company. Okay. Now, do any of us know where we're going to be in 3 years? No, we're only guaranteed today, right? But you have to keep in mind that the companies spend a lot of money into training you, hiring you, getting you on board with them. And the way they're going to make the most money is if you stay with them forever. Okay. So what I want you to say for your answer is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? I want you to say, I see myself working for you. And hopefully I will have gotten a promotion. Okay. Please don't say, I see myself opening up my new business after I learn how you're running your business so that I can compete with you, okay? Because that's how the employer takes it. It's not like you would be that blatant, but I think you're getting the gist of it here, okay? So when we are actually doing the mock interviews, one of the things that I want you to remember too is that we will go through all of these questions and help you with the actual answers as well. Some of these questions you kind of sit to yourself and think, I don't know why you're asking me this, and I certainly don't know what the answer is. And it's easy for you to freeze up and I mean, even just say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I don't know, but you could also want to clarify. You can say, I don't know the exact answer to that. Could you maybe give me a little more detail on the question that you're asking? Okay. Um, I also want you to be prepared. This says post, which means that you're going to contact your references after the interview. Okay. One of the things that I do with my references, if I were looking for a different job, is first I give them a copy of the job description and I highlight the skills on that job description that I know that I have and that I can own. Okay. Second off, I make sure they have a copy of my resume. And then I will call them afterwards and say, okay, I just got done with the interview. You're listed as my reference. I'll tell you how the interview went and then give them some high points on what you would like them to discuss. Okay, so if it was my skills on communication, I would like for my reference to talk about, one thing I really appreciate about Gloria is she's very good at communicating. Okay, I also, what we say is we are going to prepare our references, meaning that you're going to prepare them for a phone call, you're going to recap the interview, and you're going to highlight the skills that you have. Then the second part is sending that thank you again. It is a very effective way to sell yourself one more time. And you see here, it says it can be a card, email, or letter, but it is the best thing to do. I know that when you're talking with other people, sometimes they'll say, thank you letter isn't worth it, or I wouldn't waste my time. Right now, there are a lot of jobs that are available because of the pandemic, but you still want to be a step above everyone else. So you have that access to getting that job over someone else. And again, sometimes that thank you note is the key to what will actually push it over into something else. Sheila, do you have any questions?
Yes, we just had a few good ones come in here. So, first, should you say you are interested in the company because of the opportunities for minorities and women? And would you ever discuss political views?
Great questions. Yes, you can feel free to say about the minorities and women. There are a lot of companies. We have a company around here that's called Women in Construction. Okay. So yes, if that is what really motivates them, you can comfortably talk about that. In regards to politics, absolutely not. Do not bring up anything about politics because you don't know where they stand. And that could derail the whole interview very, very quickly. you can actually accidentally offend someone if you were to bring up politics if they didn't agree with what you were saying. So you would probably not get the job just based off of that.
Okay, and then should I admit to having a part-time gig or not? Catch 22, it may sound good that I'm working, but it's not in the field that I'm interviewing in.
Okay, when you are talking about admitting it, I would not talk about a part-time job at the interview whatsoever. Um, if you if they asked you in regards to do you have a part-time job right now, what I want you to say is yes, I do. I just have not had the opportunity to put my notice in yet. Then you can decide later if you want to work 2 jobs or if you want to put your notice in. But you never give the employer who's interviewing you the impression that you have more than one job. Every employer out there wants you only to work for them. Okay. In a perfect world, that probably would be great, but I know a lot of people who have to have 2 jobs. So how the employer looks at it is that you're going to be giving someone else some of the great skills that you have, and they may be looking at it like when you come to work with for me tomorrow, you're going to come tired because you've been working another job. Do you see? You don't know exactly where the employer is going to go, so I would do my best to keep it out of the interview.
Okay, and what is the best way to handle a job that wants you to do a virtual interview for a position that requires you to move out of state?
So first off, you need to decide before you interview if you're okay with moving out of state. Okay. If that's part of one of their requirements, that's part of one of their requirements. Now, because we are ending up doing so much more things virtually and remotely and working from our homes, sometimes the companies are more than willing to do that. So I would recommend that you get your job description out again and read it, find out if there's any more details in there about this working out of state. You know, we have a situation where our office is based out of Duluth. So we have what's called border states, meaning Wisconsin. So if I were to cross the border and work in Wisconsin, that would not be a big deal, right? So it just kind of depends on your actual situation. And then second off, to the virtual interview, I want you to get a hold of us at the Career Force because virtual interviews are so brand new, a lot of times we just don't know how to do them. Sheila and I, when we first started doing workshops, we hadn't done them virtually. So the way we did them was by practice, right, Sheila? so, so please get a hold of us because we can do that mock interview virtually. Now, the thing that's interesting too about a virtual interview is that you still need to practice good eye contact, meaning you look at the camera. You still practice good body language, so you want to sit up straight in your chair. You want to be attentive. A lot of this stuff, we don't know how to act, where to look, okay? We don't know how much you can actually see, so that's why I want you to practice that too. If you look behind me, I have horses. If I were to interview, I would not have that as my background because it's distracting. Okay, so you want to be aware of your background, meaning what kind of picture do you have hanging up behind you? Do you have a picture? Another thing you want to be aware of is lighting. Okay, a lot of times the lights can be too bright where you're washed out, or the lights can be too dark where they can't see you. So employers are unfortunately judging you with all of these different variables going on, and I don't want you to get ruled out because you had poor lighting. Okay, so we can go through some of that stuff if you get a hold of one of us.
Do you have time for more questions, or do
I
you
do,
need to
Sheila. Yes.
Okay. When would you recommend that we offer any letters of recommendation that we may have? These may be some of the same people who are listed as references.
Yes, and that is just fine. If your letter of recommendations come from your references, that's excellent. What I always say is when you are applying, let's say that you're applying online, sometimes they'll ask you for letters of recommendations where you can upload them right there. Most of the time they don't, okay? If they are not asking for a letter of recommendation, then you don't send it in the beginning. When you present them is at the interview itself. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a copy of that letter of recommendation, have that in your portfolio along with your resumes, and I want you just to take that letter of recommendation out during the interview, and I would recommend it towards the end. I would just say, you know, I just want to let you know too that I have a couple letter of recommendations. Do you have a problem if I give them to you? And more than likely, they're going to say, no, that'd be great. So then take them out of your portfolio, just set them on the desk, or of course, you can hand them off. But however, leave them there. Okay. So you're not going to leave the originals, you're going to leave copies, and guaranteed they will, might not read them right in front of you, but they will read them after you've left the room. Okay.
Okay. Time for another one?
Sure.
Okay. If a job posting doesn't provide a specific contact person's name and asks you to send your resume to a generic email such as jobs@whatever.com, should you actually do that, or should you try finding out the contact's name and send it to them?
Boy, that's an excellent, excellent question. So first off, I want you to be careful of scams out there, okay? But not every job description that Sheila and I put on Minnesota Works has a contact person's name either. So it depends on the company and how they want to present that job description. But I want to have you consider going into minnesotaworks.net. Sheila, would you put that in the chat as well? Our website is not a scam, and in addition to that, we verify that every employer who has a job that they're going to post on there is real. The job's real, the employer's real, and then we also verify that you're real. So I want you to be careful of some of the different places out there, for instance, like Craigslist. There's a lot of different websites where you can end up, you're giving them all this personal information, and you're actually getting scammed. So when you are sending out your resumes, when in doubt, you can always call your career force in your area too. We know a lot of the companies that are legit, and then we find out the hard way about the ones who are not. So we can possibly help you with some of that information too. But I want everyone to be aware that when you're sending out this personal information, that you're actually sending it to a real job, a real employer. I also want to remind you, I'm sure you already know this, but I want to remind you that you do not send out your social security number or your birth date, okay, until the first date of hire, meaning you're sitting there filling out your paperwork, okay?
Okay, we have lots of questions, so maybe if we have time at the end, we'll answer some more, or we'll send them in the follow-up email.
You know, Sheila, we've got time right now because we actually only have one more slide.
Oh, okay, good.
So yeah, we can go ahead.
Okay. What if I wanted to apply for a job and they won't hire me because I burnt bridges with the company when I was younger?
Boy, that's another great question. What I would recommend you do first off is hopefully the people that you burnt the bridges with are no longer at the company. That would be the ideal, okay? But let's say that they still are, say it was with the owner. I would recommend that you write a letter of apology to that person, okay? Second off, I would get a hold of HR, Human Resources, and just talk to them more about how you ended up burning some bridges in the past. How would they recommend you remedy the situation? And then when you're having that conversation with the person in HR, you can talk to them more about, could you give me some insight on how I can overcome this? And you also want to be building up the company. So you want to say to HR something like this, you know, I ended up when I was young and dumb and foolish, burning some of my bridges with ABC Supply. But I want to let you know that I believe so strongly in the product that you're creating with ABC Supply. I believe in your mission statement. I believe in the good quality work that you do, and I want to be a part of that. Do you have any recommendations on how I can make this right? And Human Resources hopefully will have some ideas for you. If you need more guidance on that, feel free to get a hold of us after class, with Sheila or I.
Okay. With virtual work, is it okay for an interviewer to ask about your work environment?
Absolutely. See, what they're asking is, are you going to have a crying baby in the background? Are you going to have a dog who's going to be barking if the mailman comes up? So yes, they can ask about your environment. You just want to be prepared for that question too, so that you can answer it appropriately. So meaning that, say that you did have your children at home. Boy, there's many people, parents right now that are working remotely at home and taking care of their children. That's reality. Okay. So you could say something like this. Well, when I end up doing my virtual workshops, I'm going to end up having my oldest child uh, keep the rest of the children over in a different area of the house so that if there is problems, no one will hear it. Um, or you could say that maybe your spouse is going to help, but you do want to have an answer so that the reason they're asking you that is because they want to know what it's going to be like for their customers to be experiencing a workshop or whatnot, anything virtual with you.
Okay, here's another one. Can I send references with resume application or only per request? I thought it may intrigue them to pick up the phone.
Boy, I completely agree with you, but I was wrong when I thought that. um, what we have been taught and what we tell people is that you send them only what they ask for. So if they ask you for your references while you're through the application process or the resume process, yes, then you send them. If they're not asking you for them, you don't know for sure if they are testing you. And I've had employers tell me this before. Gloria, a lot of times I'll ask for application and references, and I'm testing them to see if they are good at paying attention and pay close attention to detail. Okay. So the answer to that, when do I send my references? When they ask for them. Okay.
Okay, and can a recommendation letter be too old to present?
Well, what I always say is that you worked really hard for that recommendation. Okay. So if you've got one that is older, but it still has the skills that apply to the job that you are applying for, then what I recommend that you do is first get a hold of the person who gave you the letter of recommendation and let them know you're still using that, okay? And ask them for permission to white out the date that's on that letter of recommendation, or ask them if they'd be willing to write you another one, okay? But take the date off of it.
Okay. Do you know what kind of reputation Indeed has?
Well, yeah, you know what? Indeed, actually, they do check their employers too. Well, I work for the state of Minnesota, and MinnesotaWorks.net is our website. So to me, that they're the best.
um, okay, I think the last question related to finding an actual name to use to address applications or cover letters. If one isn't supplied, when do we have to submit with just a generic greeting, dear HR manager or hiring manager?
Can you read that again, Sheila? I didn't quite catch that.
Yeah, so if the name of the person isn't supplied, when you submit your application.
Okay, yep. So if you got the person, then you don't know who the contact person is. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so
Okay.
when do we have to submit with just a generic greeting, dear HR manager or hiring manager?
Okay, yes. So I guess what I would do is if the job is legit, you've verified that it is, you don't have a contact person, but that's how I would address it is, dear HR manager, please don't put on that cover letter to whom it may concern. We used to be taught that years ago and we don't do that anymore. So if you can't find the person's name, then yes, use the words dear and HR manager, or write out the word human resource manager, write it out instead of using HR, but don't use to whom it may concern. Okay.
How are we doing on time?
We still have time for a couple more if we have them.
Is it possible to sound too eager? I worry that I may seem too desperate if I reach out.
Boy, that's a really good question too. As if coming from an employer, I would be delighted to have an eager person wanting to come to work. But yes, you can cross that line. So what I would recommend you do is get a hold of us, a job counselor at your local career force, so that we can do a mock interview over the phone. And this mock interview doesn't need to take hours and hours either. Typically, we'll make sure that you've got time to talk about it, and we can set up an appointment with you, and then have a good conversation and kind of give you some feedback on your answers. We can tell a lot of times, even just over the phone, if you're too eager, just by your tone of voice. I want to also recommend that if you're doing a telephone interview, please have a mirror in front of you. Okay. It is a well-known fact that we can hear people when they're smiling. So did you catch that? We can hear people when they're smiling. Okay. Practice with your friends and try to prove me wrong on that one. Okay.
LinkedIn seems to have questionable job openings. What do you know about them?
Well, we do have a class with LinkedIn that we offer through our job club that'll be coming up in a few weeks. I do not know much about LinkedIn. In that class, if you attend it, you're going to find out an awful lot more than what I know. But LinkedIn they do also verify their jobs. Okay. I guess when you say they have some questionable jobs on there, I'd like to find out more information on what you actually mean by questionable. And then maybe I could answer that better.
If you see that a position description references a job title and you research this job title on LinkedIn, is it better to send the online application to HR manager or Jill, vice president or VP hiring manager?
You send that application and resume to whoever it says you send it to. Okay, so it's easy to go on a website and find out different information, but you send it directly to the job where it says how to apply. Okay, you follow those directions. Another thing I want to point out too, that if that job is given a job title, you want to refer to it as they call it, what the company is calling the position. So use their words, their job title. Okay, and another thing I want you to be aware of is if it is given a job ID number. So you also want to have that on your cover letter. If you can put that on your application, that'd be great. Sometimes you can't because it's online. Then you don't have control over the fields you need to fill in. But be aware of just those small details. Sometimes just by being aware of that can get you the interview and get you the position.
Okay, here's another good one. How should one handle a recruiter who wants your salary expectations before the interview with the employer and wants to set expectations even before you have spoken to anyone at the company?
Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it? So what I want you to do is that you can do a little bit of research on the salary and the type of, so let me give you an example. So if I was applying for a case manager position, what I would do is first I would Google case manager wages or average wages in Duluth, Minnesota. Okay. Another way that you can find that out is by going on one of our websites called Career One Stop. Do you want to put that into our chat too, Sheila? So with the Career One Stop, it's great, a very easy website where you can go in and you can find out what they are paying, what is the average for a case manager in the Duluth, Minnesota area. And then you can, you fit in between there. Now, let me tell you something. So let's say that you've applied for this job and say that they are giving you an hourly salary range. And let's say that on Career One Stop, it says the job you're applying for case manager pays in between $14 to $18. And they're asking you, what is your salary requirements? What do you think you would answer if you have experience as a case manager? Sheila, you're going to have to tell me their answers when they put them in the chat. So if the pay range is $14 to $18 and you're asking me what my salary requirements are and you want me to answer an hourly wage, what do you think I should say?
Oh, we're seeing 14 to 18, 18, 15, 16, 18, 17.
Yep, it's tough, isn't it? You kind of end up being all over the place. You're like, well, I got experience, of course I'm going to ask for $18.
Negotiable?
No, no. What I want you to do is go in the middle. So whoever said 16, they're right on. Okay. I want you to go in the middle because most people are doing 18 and they might be getting ruled out just based on that. Okay. You don't want to go 14 because then that shows me, and again, you don't know how the employer is perceiving this, but it shows that you don't have confidence in yourself. So you're going to go with the lowest pay, even though you have experience as a case manager. So you go right in the middle. Okay. Now, we all work for money. Okay, so let's say that you interview really well. Now they're going to talk to you more about your wage. You can do some negotiating at that time because you've just sold yourself to them. So possibly you could start at 16.50, for instance, or something on that order. But I'd go right in the middle.
So, Glory, this kind of adds on to that question. So after the interview and there's a salary offer, how long should you wait? Should you take what they give you at the first offer?
Yes. Now, you're going to get conflicting answers from this, from many different job counselors, because you can always negotiate. So your first question was, when do I get back to them? I want you to get back to them as soon as you possibly can on whether you're going to accept the position or not. What you're talking about, if you wanted to negotiate a higher salary, I just kind of want to caution you on that because worst case scenario, all they can do is say no, but you want to make sure that it's not going to be where they rescind their job offer to you as well. A lot of times, what I recommend is that you start at the salary that they're offering you. Go there and work as hard as you can. Prove yourself, okay? And then there's no reason that you can't go back to them in 90 days and ask them for a raise. Now you've shown what a valuable asset you are to the company, and the chances of them giving you more money goes way up.
Okay, I was terminated from a job. At the interview, if they ask, how should I respond?
Okay? The term I want you to use, and you need to practice this because it doesn't come easy, is I was voluntarily separated from my last position. Involuntarily separated. I said that backwards, you guys. I was involuntarily separated at my last position. Okay. Try to keep it short and sweet. If they say, well, what happened? Okay. I want you to say, I ended up where I just really started thinking that I wanted to do some career exploration and get into something different. So that didn't go over very well with my old employer. Okay. So do you see how you're owning it, but you're not getting into great detail? Okay.
Many of my best references are now retired. Can I use them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The only people you can't use as your references are your family and your mother. Okay. Your mom cannot maintain. I've called her before and she'll say stuff to me like, well, Billy's a good boy. If you just give him a job, then he can move out. Okay. Don't use your mother or your family, but yes, retired references. I don't care how old the reference is. I want to know how you are going to be as an employee. Okay, so if it's someone who can give you a good reference, yes, use them regardless of their age. I think we got time for one more question, Sheila.
Okay, I'm not sure, how much you'll know about this, but are some jobs not really hiring because of the pandemic? I have had a few interviews that seem to go so well and not hired yet.
And the answer is yes. What I've been finding in the industry is that, yes, some jobs have gone away because of the pandemic, but then in addition, some jobs have been created because of the pandemic. When you talk to some people, they'll say, well, nobody's hiring. That is just simply not true. Sheila and I see every day there are more and more and more and more employers who are hiring and they need your help. Okay. We have employers that actually call us and say, please, can you send us someone? We can't find anybody to work for us. Okay. So I believe that we actually are getting more jobs created because of the pandemic than less. It's just a lot of changes have been happening in our jobs.